It's funny, like my tip line has never been more used by enemies of Jalen Brunson.
One investigative report about Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers, and suddenly every general manager in the league is checking their phones like they just got a text from the feds. Pablo isn't done, and if you're a Knicks fan watching this right now, you may want to sit down for what I'm about to tell you, because Jalen Brunson might be next. Pablo Torre went on the Dan Patrick Show right after dropping the Kawhi Leonard bomb and said something that should have every Knicks fan sweating bullets.
Well, look, how he arrived at the Knicks, this is where I will have to defer to the reporting I may or may not do on this. Certainly was interesting, right?
This was certainly interesting. Kawhi Leonard getting $48 million from a tree planting company, and we all know how that turned out. But here's where it gets absolutely wild, and Jalen Brunson's arrival in New York are so similar, it's like they're reading from the same playbook. And I'm not just talking about the obvious stuff. I'm talking about a pattern so clear that when you see it all laid out, you're gonna wonder how we missed it for so long. Let's start with the most obvious red flag. On June 2022, the New York Knicks are supposedly focused on free agency, right? They're clearing up cap space, making moves, getting ready for the big fish. No, their very first transaction is hiring Rick Brunson as an assistant coach, Jalen Brunson's father. Now, Rick Brunson isn't some nobody. He played 9 years in the NBA. He's been an assistant coach before with Tom Thibodeau in Chicago and Minnesota. But come on, you hire the dad right before free agency starts, and then a month later, his son signs with your team, and it's not just that they hired Rick, it's who hired him. Literally his godfather. Rick was actually Rose's first client ever, and Rose's son, Sam Rose, he was Jalen's agent at the time. And they hire the player's actual dad as a coach right before free agency. And we're supposed to believe that this was all kosher. But to really understand why the Knicks might have been willing to bend or break the rules to get Brunson, you need to understand just how desperate they were in June of 2022. In 2020 to 2021, they shocked everyone by making the playoffs as the fourth seed. Julius Randle won Most Improved Player, made All-NBA. The Garden was rocking again, and for the first time in almost a decade, the Knicks were relevant. They were back. And then the playoffs happened. 29.8%. It was one of the worst playoff performances by a star player in NBA history.
9-0 New York run to lead by 9 with a minute 13 is Trae Young.
The 2021 to 2022 season was an absolute disaster. They finished 37-45, missed the playoffs entirely, and finished 11th in the East. Randle regressed so badly that fans were literally ripping his poster down outside of Madison Square Garden. They started the season with Kemba Walker, the hometown hero from the Bronx, four-time All-Star, finally coming home to save the Knicks. By November, Tibbs had completely removed him from the rotation. The man's knees were cooked. He'd score 44 one night, and then wouldn't be able to move for the next 3 games. Elfrid Payton started 63 games in 2020 to 2021 and shot 28.6% from 3. 33-year-old Derrick Rose, who played 26 games all season because his body was falling apart. This wasn't just about needing a point guard. This was about 20 years of point guard disasters. Since they had prime Stephon Marbury, the Knicks had cycled through Elfrid Payton, Frank Ntilikina, Emmanuel Mudiay, a broken Derrick Rose, Jarrett Jack, Jose Calderon, Davis's corpse, and I'm probably forgetting like 10 more guys. The New York media is crushing you. The fans are furious. James Dolan is literally breathing down your neck. And then there's Jalen Brunson, young, healthy, just averaged 32 points in the playoffs when Luka Doncic was hurt, a real point guard who can actually shoot and doesn't need a walker to get up the court. He's everything you need, and he's being severely undervalued in free agency. This is exactly the same desperation the Clippers had with Kawhi Leonard. They finally had a chance to get a superstar and become relevant. They had just opened a new arena. Steve Ballmer had spent $2 billion on the team. They needed Kawhi. The Knicks needed Brunson just as badly, maybe worse, because at least the Clippers made the playoffs in the previous season and were seen as a team with significant depth. They had that incredible series versus the Golden State Warriors in the first round. But the New York Knicks had Julius Randle shooting sub 30% in the playoffs and a bunch of broken point guards. When you're that desperate, when you fail for that long, when the pressure is that intense, that's when you start thinking about bending the rules. That's when you start thinking, hey, what if we hire his his dad? What if we promise him things under the table? What if we find a way to pay him outside the salary cap? And that's what the Clippers did through aspiration. And the Knicks, well, again, Pablo hasn't even dug into this yet. The Knicks hired Rick Brunson, tampered before free agency, and then somehow got Jalen to leave $116 million on the table. You think that's a coincidence? You think both teams just randomly get that lucky when they're desperate? Come on. And the NBA didn't believe it either. They investigated and took away the Knicks' 2025 second-round pick for tampering. The league literally said that the Knicks engaged in free agency discussions prior to the date when such discussions were permitted. And this is where the Kawhi parallels really start. Remember how in the Kawhi situation, he was already at his max contract with the Clippers, so they couldn't legally pay him more through the team. Well, let's talk about what Mark Cuban said about losing Jalen Brunson. There's been so many times where he's proven to me that he's a bit of a snake, especially how he came and tried to defend Steve Ballmer. But Mark Cuban went on record saying that the Mavs never even got a chance to match the Knicks' offer. He said, "We didn't know what the bid was. They never gave us a number. Knowing the numbers now, I would have paid it in a heartbeat." Brunson himself admitted that the Mavs could have locked him up for 4 years, $55 million before the season, but they just didn't offer it. Then they could have offered it during the season, but they didn't. Cuban was lowballing his own player. This is where Cuban really tells on himself. Cuban admitted that after the season ended, after Brunson had just balled out in the playoffs, averaging 32 points when Luka was hurt, the Mavs were only willing to offer about $21 million per year. So Cuban cheaped out by $5 million a year, and then has the nerve to say, where it went south was when Rick took over, when the parent took over. He literally blamed Brunson's dad. Cuban had to apologize for that comment when he went on Brunson's podcast recently. Look guys, all of this is just the appetizer. I mean, again, the NBA literally said that the Knicks signed Jalen Brunson after tampering. The reason why it's not a big deal is because the NBA barely punished them for this. But what Pablo is investigating isn't even that. What Pablo's investigating is his recent contract extension. If Jalen Brunson took a legitimate $113 million pay cut to sign with the New York Knicks so they could free up the cap space to re-sign OG Anunoby, trade for Karl Anthony Towns, and retain Mikal Bridges, then he is without a doubt a New York Knicks legend. That is a tremendous sacrifice to put your team in a position to win the NBA Finals this year. And again, I'm making this video as a bit of a primer to what Pablo Torre's investigation could look like. So the main course is what happened on July of 2024, because that's when things get really suspicious. Jalen Brunson signed a 4-year, $156 million contract extension. Sounds like a lot of money, right? In any particular instance, we'd say that man hit the lottery. But if Brunson had waited 1 year, he could have signed for $269 million over 5 years. Most NBA players make in their entire career. That's generational wealth, and he said, New York Knicks legend. But at the same time, would anyone leave that much money on the table without getting something back? And here's where it gets really interesting. Brunson signs his extension in July of 2024, taking a massive discount. That same summer, Rick Brunson, his dad, gets promoted to lead assistant coach. He gets a raise. The NBA immediately starts investigating whether Rick's promotion was compensation for Jalen taking less money. The Knicks response? They put out this aggressive statement saying it's offensive that anyone would suggest Rick Brunson didn't deserve the promotion. You know who else claimed that they were being harassed? Nobody, because innocent people don't usually accuse investigators of harassment. They just cooperate and clear their name. But let's talk about what Pablo Torre is currently looking at now. Brunson could become a free agent. The Knicks could lose draft picks. They could face massive fines. Hell, if it's bad enough, James Dolan could face a suspension. And don't think other owners wouldn't love that. Dolan has been feuding with Adam Silver. He's criticized the league office. He's been a pain in their ass for years. If they can use this to take him down, they just might. But here's the real kicker, the thing that should have every Knicks fan worried. What if there are documents about Brunson as well? What if there are emails between Leon Rose and Rick Brunson discussing the job? And with the Knicks, there's always someone pissed off. It's the most dysfunctional organization in basketball, even when they're winning. Look, I want to be clear about something. I like Jalen Brunson. I think his basketball story is one of the most inspirational stories in all of sports, because Pablo hasn't missed so far. He spent 7 months on the Kawhi story. If he's putting that same energy into investigating Brunson, if he's got that same level of detail, this could be even bigger than the Kawhi scandal. Brunson is the face of the New York Knicks, the biggest market in basketball, the team everyone watches. And here's my prediction. I think Pablo's got something. I think that's why he was so coy on Dan Patrick. You don't tease a story unless you know there's a story there. But let me know in the comment section down below. I'm dropping our mic. Until our next upload.